There are places in this world where the past never dies. One such place is Pine Hill Cemetery, a small, forgotten graveyard tucked away in the dense woods of a rural town. Pine Hill has always had a dark reputation. Stories of strange occurrences and sightings have swirled around it for decades. But it wasn't until a group of paranormal investigators decided to spend the night there that the true horror of Pine Hill was revealed. The sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows across the dense forest surrounding Pine Hill Cemetery. The investigators, Mark, Lisa, and Jake, drove down the narrow dirt road, their car rattling over the uneven surface. The trees seemed to close in on them, and the air grew colder as they neared the cemetery. Mark, the leader of the group, glanced at the GPS. "We're almost there," he said, his voice tinged with excitement and unease. The car rolled to a stop in front of a rusty wrought iron gate. The entrance to Pine Hill Cemetery was marked by a crumbling stone archway, overgrown with ivy and moss. The gate creaked as Jake pushed it open, the sound echoing through the stillness of the evening. Beyond the gate, the gravestones stood in rows, some leaning, some broken, all covered in the grime of decades. As darkness fell, the team unpacked their equipment. Mark set up a camera on a tripod, aiming it toward the oldest part of the cemetery, where the graves dated back to the early 1800s. Lisa and Jake unpacked the EMF meters, voice recorders, and thermal cameras. The air was thick with tension as they worked silently, the only sound being the occasional rustle of leaves or distant hoot of an owl. As they began their investigation, the atmosphere in the cemetery seemed to shift. The air grew colder, and a thick fog began to roll in, creeping between the gravestones. The fog seemed almost unnatural, swirling around the team and obscuring their vision. Lisa shivered and glanced around nervously. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, but the others were too focused on their equipment to respond. Jake wandered away from the group, drawn by a strange feeling. As he reached an ancient mausoleum, he suddenly felt an intense chill run down his spine. His breath formed clouds in the air as he stepped closer. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a shadowy figure standing among the tombstones. It was tall and thin, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Jake froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Meanwhile, Mark and Lisa had set up a voice recorder near the oldest grave, hoping to capture any paranormal sounds. As they played back the recording, they heard something faint, a low whisper, almost too quiet to make out. They leaned in closer, straining to hear. The whisper grew louder, and soon it was clear. Someone, or something, was speaking. "Leave, now!" the voice hissed, sending chills down their spines. The tension in the air grew unbearable. Mark felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to leave the cemetery, but he pushed it aside, determined to finish the investigation. As he turned to check on Lisa, he saw her stumble backward, as if shoved by an unseen force. She gasped, her eyes wide with terror. "Something just pushed me!" she cried, backing away from the tombstones. Mark rushed to her side, but there was no one else around. Jake, still shaken from his earlier encounter, found himself drawn to the mausoleum again. He pushed open the heavy stone door, which groaned loudly on its rusted hinges. The air inside was stale and cold, and the smell of decay was overwhelming. As he shone his flashlight inside, he saw something that made his blood run cold, scratches on the inside of the door, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. As the night wore on, the activity in the cemetery intensified. The temperature dropped even further, and the fog thickened, reducing visibility to just a few feet. The team's equipment began to malfunction. Batteries drained rapidly, cameras flickered, and the EMF meters spiked erratically. The whispering voices grew louder, more insistent, and the shadowy figures seemed to move closer with every passing moment. Lisa began to panic. The voices in her head grew louder, more menacing, and she felt as though she was being watched from every direction. Her breathing became ragged, and she clutched her head, trying to block out the overwhelming fear. Mark grabbed her by the shoulders, trying to calm her down, but she only screamed in response, her eyes wild with terror. "They're coming for us!" she cried, her voice cracking. Realizing they were in over their heads, Mark decided it was time to leave. But as they made their way back to the entrance, the fog seemed to thicken even more, and the temperature dropped to near freezing levels. They could barely see a few feet in front of them, and the path seemed to twist and turn, leading them deeper into the cemetery instead of out. The voices grew louder, more frantic, and the shadowy figures closed in around them. As they stumbled through the fog, they came across something they hadn't noticed before: a large, ornate tomb, its stone door slightly ajar. It was unlike any other structure in the cemetery, with intricate carvings depicting scenes of death and torment. Drawn to it, Mark cautiously approached the tomb, his flashlight flickering ominously. The others hesitated, a deep sense of dread rooting them in place. Mark pushed open the tomb door, and the smell of decay hit him like a wave. Inside, the walls were lined with crypts, each one sealed with a heavy stone slab. But one of the slabs had been moved, revealing a dark, gaping hole. Mark shone his flashlight inside, revealing a set of stairs leading down into the earth. The light barely penetrated the darkness, but he could see that the walls were covered in more of those strange, sinister carvings. With a mix of fear and determination, Mark descended the stairs, the others reluctantly following behind. The stairs seemed to go on forever, winding deeper and deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, and the smell of decay intensified with each step. The walls closed in around them, and the oppressive darkness pressed down on their minds. As they descended, the whispering voices grew louder, more insistent, now echoing all around them. The carvings on the walls became more disturbing, depicting twisted, nightmarish scenes that seemed to move in the flickering light. At the bottom of the stairs, they found themselves in a large circular chamber. The walls were lined with skulls and bones, arranged in intricate patterns. In the center of the room was a stone altar, stained with dark, dried blood. The air was thick with the scent of death, and the whispering voices were now deafening, filling the chamber with a cacophony of fear and despair. As the team approached the altar, they felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, a presence in the room, watching them, waiting. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted, and the shadows on the walls began to move, swirling around the chamber like a dark vortex. The whispering voices reached a fever pitch, screaming in a language none of them understood. Then, from the darkness, a figure emerged. A tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a mouth twisted into a malicious grin. It moved towards them with unnatural speed, its presence filling the room with pure, unbridled terror. The team didn't wait to see what would happen next. In a blind panic, they turned and fled up the stairs, the figure's laughter echoing behind them. As they burst out of the tomb, the fog had cleared, and the cemetery was eerily silent. They didn't stop running until they reached their car, hearts pounding, breaths coming in ragged gasps. As they sped away from Pine Hill Cemetery, the realization sank in. They had encountered something truly evil, something that would haunt them forever. Days later, the team reviewed the footage from that night. To their horror, the cameras had captured everything: the shadowy figures, the moving carvings, the ghostly whispers. But the worst part was the final shot, just before they fled. The gaunt figure standing at the entrance of the tomb, watching them with those hollow eyes, its twisted grin growing wider. They knew then that Pine Hill Cemetery was no ordinary place. It was a gateway to something far darker, something that should never be disturbed. Pine Hill Cemetery remains a place shrouded in mystery and fear. The team never returned, but the horrors they experienced that night stayed with them, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurks just beneath the surface of our world. Sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and those who dare to disturb it risk unleashing unspeakable terror.
Thank you for watching Midnight Knocks. If you enjoyed our horror stories, please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to check out our other videos for more eerie adventures. Until next time, stay spooky.